welcome to Savvy's Science Show. Are you ready to get savvy with science? Wow, I sure am glad you're all joining me for some excellent experimental education. Today, we're talking X-rays. Have you ever been doing a science show and Waldo comes in looking for retribution because you pointed him out in a crowd to the cops? Me neither. I said me neither!
Savvy Science Show. Savvy Science Show. If you want to learn about science from somebody named Savannah, Savvy Science Show.
When the primary beam exits the X-ray tube and comes towards you, it consists of low, medium, and high energy X-rays. Filtration is very important to get rid of those pesky low energy X-rays that only get absorbed by the skin and can cause cancer. But first of all, what is filtration in X-ray? Filtration is using a device or material that blocks out some or all wavelengths of X-rays in the X-ray spectrum for medical X-rays. Even air is a filter. In X-ray, this means filtering out all those pesky low energy ones. If there is no filtration, the low energy X-rays will get stuck in the skin. The low energy X-rays are around 30 kVp and unable to penetrate the atomic part. Radiation getting caught in your skin isn't very good, and too much of it can have adverse effects, like cancer. This is called absorption. Absorbed X-rays do not transmit to the IR, so they don't contribute to the image and only add more radiation dose to the patient. Some of these low energy and even some higher energy X-rays get redirected by the body. This is called scatter. Scatter is bad because it may redirect out of the body and onto a part of the image receptor. Where it lands will cause the film to expose, but it does not properly represent the anatomic part. It only adds more dose to the patient. Most higher energy X-rays will transmit right through to the image receptor and accurately represent the part, which is why we don't want to filter all of the X-rays out. Now that we're savvy with how filtration works, let's determine between the inherent and added filtration of the tube, which together make up the total filtration of the tube. Inherent is all the stuff in the X-ray tube and the housing itself. There are things that permanently get in the way that we just can't get rid of. These include the glass envelope of the tube, the oil in the tube, and the exit window. The tube housing adds about 0.5 millimeter of filtration. For added filtration, these are things that are added to the tube. Some are added inside the housing. For example, we have aluminum. Aluminum is a good filter, so the more you have, the harder your beam will be. Each X-ray machine has a minimum amount of aluminum. This is dictated by the country's safety regulations. Canada has a minimum of 2.5 millimeters thick. The US has a minimum of 2.1 millimeters. This means that Canada requires a more consistently hard beam, which reduces the dose to the patient. Way to go, Canada! Woo! The aluminum also expresses the half-value layer of the beam. The half-value layer is the way we assess the hardness of the beam. It's the amount of filtration required to reduce the intensity of the beam by half. This makes a more consistently hard beam, resulting in less dose to the patient, because there are fewer lower energy X-rays being let through to the patient. This aluminum also accounts to get rid of that nasty scatter we saw earlier. The X-rays that transmit straight through without deflecting make for good image quality. Some of the X-rays get redirected, so they don't go straight through the body, making them end up elsewhere on the image. This lowers the image quality, since it doesn't accurately represent the anatomical part. This is what we call fog on the image, and it isn't useful. Scatter can come from the tube, or as seen before, from the patient. It comes from the tube when electrons fired at the anode don't hit the focal spot, the spot that they're supposed to. When the electrons hit the anode, they create the primary beam of X-rays moving down towards the body. If they don't hit in the correct spot, they can end up going anywhere and hit the wrong anatomical part, making it detrimental to the image if it transmits through the part. To control for this, we need to restrict the beam before it reaches the patient. When we do this, we decrease the dose to the patient and improve the image quality. All these beam restrictors attach to the tube housing. First is the aperture diaphragm. It's simply a sheet of lead with a hole cut in the middle. It stops all X-rays that are not directed through the hole. This is the simplest type of beam restricting device, but the least effective, as it creates a large penumbra, or shadow, cast by the periphery of the X-ray beam. This penumbra causes uncertainty. It can be reduced by positioning the diaphragm as far away from the tube as possible. Another beam restrictor you can use is a lead cone or cylinder that both attach to the tube housing. Both have an extended flange that can be telescopic. By getting the end as close to the patient as possible, you can limit the penumbra. The cylinder is better than the cone as it allows for less beam divergence. The cylinder is often used in a dentist's office to see the teeth or to better see the sinuses in a more medical setting. Finally, collimators. They're comprised of 2 to 3 lead shutters that are individually movable, making the beam turns from a circle to a square or rectangle. It is the most sophisticated and useful in radiography. There's a light projected from the tube housing, and it shows where the beam will hit. When the image receptor is inserted, collimators can move to the size of the image receptor. This is known as positive beam limitation and reduces the patient dose by ensuring you're not exposing an anatomic part that won't end up on the IR. Those beam restricting devices make sure those off-focus X-rays don't reach the body. But the number one place scatter is created is the body itself. It's those X-rays that get deflected when traveling through the body, creating fog on the image receptor. The more fog, the worse image quality due to the lower contrast. You can decrease this by putting a grid in front of the IR and behind the patient. It'll clean up the image. You can also use compensation filtration to get rid of the scatter produced by the body, and to even out areas of the body with high contrast or wide differences in density. Some can attach to the housing of the tube via the magnetic attachment. Others you can place directly on the part. The thickness of this wedge filter will even out the density from the skinniness of the toes. You can also use ingot filters and boomerang filters. Compensation filters are really good because they reduce the dose to the patient. But they can be bad because they can be hard to keep in place. For a shoulder, you'd want to get it in front of the patient so they don't get the dose. But without a lot of tape, it's not going to stay. So you can always put it behind the patient and get them to lean back on it to keep it in place. And this does not reduce the dose to the patient, but it might make your picture look a little better. We need these types of filtration to get rid of those low energy X-rays. This increases the average beam energy, allowing more to transmit through to the image receptor and accurately represent the anatomic part. The less dose received by the patient is following best practice and the principle of Alera. Recall that off-focus radiation is radiation that doesn't hit the focal spot on the anode. Most X-ray machines in the hospitals are dual focus, meaning they have 2 filaments in the focusing cup, one large and one small, which correspond to a large and small focal spot on the anode. Only one of these is energized at a time. Depending on the filament used, there are 2 different focal spot tracks on the anode. Each have a different angle to help aim the X-rays down towards the patient. When the electrons hit these tracks on the anode, it's the actual focal spot. Any electrons that don't hit here are the off-focus radiation that we mentioned earlier. The smaller focal spot is usually around 6 degrees and the larger one around 12. The larger the angle, the larger the focal spot size on the patient, or the effective focal spot size will be. This is known as the line focus principle. This angling allows for good heat capacity and image quality. The smaller the focal spot size, the smaller the penumbra and better the image quality. But it can only withstand up to a certain limit of MA. Too much and you'll get pitting. To rectify this, you'll have a longer exposure time, or you'll have to use the larger focal spot. Therefore, the smaller focal spot will be used for smaller exposures, like a pediatric elbow, and the larger one for larger exposures, like an adult knee. Due to the angulation of one side of the anode, some X-ray energy gets dissipated by the heel of the anode. So the X-ray energy on the cathode side is more intense than that on the anode side. This is known as the anode heel effect. We can use this to our advantage and put the thicker part on the cathode side. Now that you're savvy with filtration, beam restricting devices, and a focal spot of the X-ray tube, you can answer these questions on the handed out sheet no problem. Well, now you're savvy with science. Until next time.
The Savvy Science Show. This Savvy Science Show. If you want to learn about science from somebody named Savannah, Savvy Science Show.
Oh, hey there. I heard that you wanted to get rid of some scatter and improve your image quality. Well, I've got just the thing for you. It's a compensation filter. It also decreases your dose to your patient. Wow! This one can go on your shoulder, but you have 2 shoulders, don't you? Well, you can get one for $19.99 or 2 for $19.99 if you order right now.
What's going on here, Savvy?
Going on here, we're setting up the tube.
The what?
The tube.
Oh my god. Dude. Should I be like behind some shielding? Am I gonna get superpowers from this?
You're gonna die.
Okay.
Block that's inside. Are you ready to get savvy with science? Wow, I sure am glad you're all joining me again for some... I'm sorry. You're all joining me for some excellent experimental education. And if you're just gathering at the information station for the first time, well, get prepared to hop on board the Skeletrain.
Could have been better. You know, it could have been worse. The timestamp says it's January 1st, 2009, so we've got literally years to figure this out. Kevin, what are your thoughts so far?
Dude.
Dude, indeed.
You may be thinking, but isn't radiation bad? The answer is no. Okay, well, sometimes, well, most of the time, it's not good. Like spending too much time in the sun where the ultraviolet rays get ya. Or standing in front of a running microwave, but with the door wide open. I got the thick part over the toes, so it evens out the body part a little bit.
Please stand by.
We're having technical
Ba 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 ba. It's the Savvy Show doing science and things are going really well. It's the Savvy Science Show. Ba, 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 ba. There's nothing going on.
Okay,
and
cut.
And we're going over here and continuing. It's the Savvy Science Show. This is it.
I think so.
Do you want to say hi to your mom?